Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Snowpiercer. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. This episode actually gave us a little more insight into Audrey. She's a character that we've seen a little bit, kind of learned a little bit about, but this episode really gave us a lot more insight into her, and obviously, like, why she has been so off-kilter when it came to Wilfred, because I feel like out of anyone, next to Melanie, it seems like she might have the most intimate relationship with him. She even breaks it down to Andre about how she was kind of, hired an escort ever since she was like 18 in the Chicago area and go to like all these rich parties and stuff like that, and that's just how things kind of were. But Wilfred she was exclusively his, and we kind of get this, like, because obviously she made it clear, because that's why she's talked about it, where, she knows Wilfred on a level I think even Melanie might not know, or maybe, like I said, Melanie might be the only other person that knows him on this level, but for her, I guess she spent enough time with him to know who he is and how he thinks and how he operates. So that kind of makes her the best weapon against him. But it also, I think, this episode also sets up like how vulnerable it's left Audrey, because it's like you're supposed to get close to something and someone who's had their hooks into you before, and it's like, because she even said, she's like, I'm not doing this for you, I'm not doing this for the train, I'm not doing this for Melanie, I'm doing this for me, because I think this is something she's kind of run from for so long, that if she's able to kind of put closest chapter of that book of her life, I think it's supposed to be closure to a certain extent. It's like, I need to, I guess, facing her past, facing her demons, because I don't think it's just the way the relationship seemed like. Obviously, it's like she's able to, have Wilfred twisted around her fingers, but I think the intoxication of that toxic relationship, I mean, it's not even a relationship, because can there ever be a relationship when it comes to Wilfred? Because to him, people are just a means to an end. It's just like, I'm what matters, you're here to service me. Hell, even when everyone's picked, some lucky few people get to go on Snowpiercer with me because we're doing this science, it's so exciting because, hey, we're shooting up a balloon to see, hey, if Melanie links up with it, she's not dead. But Wilfred's all, man, I hope she's dead. So, but, he initially, the other three are like, oh my god, we're so excited. Oh, what do you think it's going to be like on Snowpiercer? Oh, the night car, what's it going to be like? It's like a brothel? It's more like a burlesque show. And then it was like, oh, guys, you excited? Ha ha ha, shut it. This is my night. This is about me and this stupid experiment. He shut that shit down quick to be like, oh, you're excited. This isn't about you. You're not important. I'm the guest of honor. I'm important. I'm me, me, me. He makes it pretty clear. I mean, hell, even when he came in, everyone was about to step. He's like, no, it's good. You don't have to this one time. So it's like that power dynamic, that there's no way, it seems almost like Wilfred's incapable of, even the way he treats Alex, the moment Alex is like, oh, his he's only going there to see his paramour, he was like, okay, somewhat chill before, he's like, oh, don't call her, she's so much more than that. The moment Alex called her dad again, he was like, shut your damn mouth, I told you don't call her that. It's like he lost his shit, and so it's a train ran on fear rather than love. Because even later on, home dude, Ozzy, the quote-unquote last Ozzy, but he finds out, oh, Emily, Amelia, not Emily, but Amelia, you're an Ozzy too, yeah. It's like, but you guys are good over there, right? How are you guys doing? It's like, no, we're good. None of them want to admit, he's ruling tyrannically. Yes, Snowpiercer has its issues, but I mean, that's kind of where Melanie got the foundation of kind of how things were going to operate, just cause, to a certain extent, that's how he is as a person. And it's like, so many people are kind of swept away by his charisma to a certain extent, like Ruth, but, I think people like Melanie, like Andre, like Audrey can see him for who he is. But what I'm going to circle back to is, because it didn't even click in my head until later on when Audrey, we got that bathtub scene where it's like she was getting inside of his heart and head a little bit. And I was like, when he was sitting in the bathtub, I was like, right, what did Kevin do? He had Kevin slit his wrist, and we saw the scar from Audrey. I was like, because that was our first time ever seeing that scar of hers. And I was like, oh, because I figured the way she was, it seemed like it was connected to Wilfred, but didn't know, he literally handed her the blade to cut herself. He gets some sick satisfaction from it. It's like, you made me cut myself. He's like, yeah, but I saved you. So I guess, either, the toxic situation he put her in, kind of this need, like, because it seems like he does that to everyone. It's like, you need me, so it's like my word is law. When I tell you to do something, you do it, because I make you feel important. I give you a need. I give you a purpose. If without me, you have nothing. You are nothing, and that's what I think that's how he, very much like a cult leader. He kind of seduces you in like that with his charisma, and then makes you dependent on him. And I think that's what ended up happening to Audrey. And I guess either he was like, oh, do this for me, and she did it, but he was like, oh, but I didn't let you die. I saved you, so, because I would never let you go. Or either she was trying to get away from him, and she tried to kill herself. So mainly like, you did either he did actually make her slit her wrist like Kevin, or either it's just a situation of like, you might as well have put the blade in my hand because of what you've done to me, like what you put me through. And because of that, but he was like, oh, I'm not willing to let you go. So he's like, I saved you. Or maybe all of that was him being like, oh, I am saving you. Like, I don't know. Like, Wilfred's got a twisted mind, and it's hard to understand what's going through that twisted mind of his. So, but the reason why I think it's complicated is because Zara walked in on him, and it's because it's like, Audrey was like, after 30 minutes, if I'm not out, pull me out. And so she goes in there and sees that whole scene unfold, but we see that look in Audrey's face, because I think for her, it's like I was bringing up, like, she feels like, oh my God, she's back to being like, oh, this is the purpose you gave me. Like, she gets a little seduced in it herself like that. I think that's the toxicity between them, where it's like he feeds off of it, but on some level she feeds off of it too and kind of needs it. And I think that's what she was worried about. And so at the very end, she's like, no, Wilfred's exactly where we want him. And it's like, I don't think the sad thing is, she's putting herself so close to the edge that this whole thing is a double-edged sword. It's not just going to be Wilfred that's struck, she is too, And I think she's kind of worried about it, but she's trying to make everyone think she's okay, because Andre's checking, like, are you really okay? Like, you don't, like, multiple times they're trying to ask her if she wants to bow out of this, but still. There's also the whole situation where there's a continuation of the Ruth and Andre thing, because Ruth is like, Andre won't trust me. Like, the fact of the matter is, he's keeping me at arm's length with everything, because it's like, oh, he got the message about like, oh, they want to treat all the people with the free, all the freeze victims. And it's like, okay. And he kind of leaves it at that, but then Ruth opens it up and reads it. So I'm assuming there definitely was more to it, but I'm assuming it was connected to all the Audrey Nightcar stuff. And so maybe, but Ruth is just kind of like, all right, there's still stuff. He was reading it, but he wasn't talking to me about it. And even to the point, Zara is kind of being that in between, and it's like, hey, I'm gonna let you, I'm gonna become a bit of hospitality. So for Andre's sake, she's like, I'm gonna be the in between. That way, I could get Ruth kind of more on your side. For Ruth, it's like, hey, you can have me on your side, and I get Andre more on your side. It's like, oh, I mean, but that's, once again, it throws Zara's situation in question, because it's like whose side are you really on in this? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, she's kind of on her own side, and I guess that probably leans her more toward Andre's side, because it's like, well, it's baby and everything. So I don't know. I'm curious about how that's going to play out, especially her being part of hospitality and stuff like that. I mean, granted, like, it's everyone in the tale kind of resents her already. I don't know, like, whether this is going to have a positive swing or not, but obviously, what I also thought was interesting too is, like, obviously the scientists, the couple from I think they're a couple. Yeah, they're a couple. I think they're husband and wife. They're treating everyone, and then the doctor on Snowpiercer is like, "Oh, what is that?" Which I didn't even think about. I was like, right, she's on. She's a lawyer currently, Penelope, on Big Sky. I didn't think about that when she popped up in Big Sky. It didn't cross my mind to think about that. But regardless, I was just going on a tangent. She was asking, like, oh, what this was about. And the dude was like, oh, it's this. And he looked at his wife, and it's like, oh, we're not supposed to tell you, because the last thing we want is you guys to know how to make it yourselves. But also, Mr. Wilfred wants to have some power over it. It's like, he doesn't want the dynamic to completely be like, oh, because obviously we're seeing some trading and stuff like that. But that's obviously a big theme of the episode, where it's like, yeah, you like Snowpiercer, and obviously Snowpiercer was always like that, but now, like, with Big Alice, it's even more like that. The whole trading to get what you want, but sometimes you have to give a little bit more. You end up giving more in the situation, and what that costs you in the long run. Because even, as I was talking about earlier with Audrey, even she's saying, like, she lost everything because of Wilfred. And what that necessarily means, we'll ultimately have to wait and find out whether that was like a baby situation or not, or who knows. But at the end of the day, there's also the Josie situation, because the moment it happened, like, I was like, oh, like Andre and Josie are both thinking like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. This like, oh, helping freeze victims is like, this just ends up happening now. And it's like, is he aware? Like, was this all planned? It's like, it's too much of a coincidence. Like Josie, they're finding out she's still alive and under the condition that she's in. And it's like who would have told him about me? Because it's like, because I didn't know at first how they were referencing that, whether it has something to do with Andre and Josie's past, and maybe that's what it's like, oh, how did he know about us being, but it's like, no, it's about, like, how did he know specifically about me, like, this was meant to be, I guess he that's what was in the letter, I'm so stupid, that, they never expressly say that, but it's like, that's why he specifically presented this, because he's all about power over people, and he knows that, like, hey, Josie's important to you, Andre, and I hear she's going through what she's going through. Hey, we can help her with her treatment. And that's why Ruth later on says this line of, I know who it is that you're having. It's like, no, I'll take them to it. She's like, no, it's hospitality's, duty to transport, walk them to the next person. But it's like, I know who you're visiting, which Andre now knows, like, you read the letter. So I'm sure that makes him even a little more distrustful of Ruth. It's just, because even Ruth had said it to Zara, like, yes, I have my affinity for Mr. Wilford, but my loyalty is to this train. But obviously that's not enough. Because, I mean, out of anyone, she's the most gung-ho about Wilford without, I mean, granted, understandably so, considering, like, why Andre would keep her at arm's length, considering everything that went down last season when you found out about Wilford not really being on a train and what that kind of became, so it's understandable. I mean, there's going to be that still rough patch of like, yeah, wasn't that long ago we went through the war and everything. So there's still obviously plenty of scars in many different regards, but that now I'm sitting here talking it out, it makes sense to me. It's like, right, that's what was in the note. It was specifically referencing Josie, but even he was like, they were like, how would he know about me? We're tailies. We weren't even on the original registry, so like, it's like, was it Ruth? And Andre is like, no, well, at least not yet. He's like, so he's still kind of wary of like, Ruth could potentially be a source in the future, but no. So it's like, because I don't think she knew about Josie until that moment, that Josie was still alive and everything. Like, she didn't know that until the letter. So that's why he was like, yeah. So it makes you wonder who is feeding him that information. Part of me wonders, is it LJ? I don't know. She's just a little too, like, trying to get close to him. So maybe this is her trying to, maybe LJ and, well, I don't know. Would LJ know? Well, she's working with the custodians now, so she might have come across Josie, but I feel like they would have made a point of that. But it's like, because it seems like she's trying to worm and squirm her way out of this like her current circumstance, and like get buddy with Wilford works in that favor. But I'm like, I don't know. I still don't know what her and Oz are up to. More so her. Like Oz, she's the manipulator, she's the killer. So you don't. She's the one you worry about the most. Like, Oz is an asshole, but she's more of the devil, that you have to be more wary of. He's just some, like I said, Oz is just kind of an asshole. Opportunistic asshole, but one regardless, so. And I brought it up earlier, referencing scars. There's a whole situation with Bess this episode. Obviously, she's investigating the Breachmen, continuing that because like she feels like they're her best lead. Now, whether they're the ones necessarily responsible for what happened to Light, who knows? But they're definitely not completely innocent in this because they are like team pro Wilford and everything. But aside from all of that, like obviously, like when she was nearby, she sees the pictures of everyone that died during the war and everything, and she kind of breaks down. And the pastor is there for her. And, there's a whole conversation for her where it's like, before she knew exactly where she belonged, she knew her purpose to a certain extent, and now she's kind of lost. She doesn't know, she's kind of lost a little bit of herself. She's kind of alone during all this. And it's like, there's only 3,000 people left. It's kind of what the pastor was saying, but she specified 2,747. She's like, actually 46 because a mess hall chief or whatever chef ended up dying, so we're down to like 46. And so the fact is, keeping totals like that shows you, like, well, I mean, obviously for hospitality it makes sense, but also for best, that show, because she said they went through so much, they lost so much death and destruction during the war, but she walked away. Not only is she a survivor, she walked away with few scars, and I think that makes her feel even more guilty, you know. And I think that's why she wants to fight even more for light, because she wants to like fight even more for the people. It's like it's almost like for her, it's like I got away from it too good, of like, yeah, I wanted to help this fight and everything, but so much was lost. I have to preserve so much life, considering there's so little of us. But even the pastor being like, there were billions of lives lost because of the freeze, and so it makes that survivor's guilt even more, because this is the last of humanity on this train, and it's like any life lost under any circumstances, you being the one alive, you walking away being the least maimed out of anybody, of course it's gonna hit you even harder, because these are like the most extreme circumstances of like every life lost is that much closer to the extinction of the human race to a certain extent. And it's like, so every life is that much like, every life was valuable to begin with, but because there's so few left, it makes every life that much more valuable, and it just makes you feel more guilty of like, I'm still here, I have no scars, I play my part in this. Like, there are other people that could be and should be alive, but they're not, and I'm alive. Maybe I should. I think once she's kind of getting her head, like, I think that's what's making her want to like pursue this so hard, want this justice on the train so much, because she wants to try and I think make sure that it was all worth it, that it doesn't become it was all for nothing type of thing, you know. So obviously the tail takes it in their own hands and attack the breachman. That turns into a scrap, which everyone's trying to like, Andre's trying to calm everything down because he's got the whole, you know, Wilford on the train thing, and it's like, all right, we need to lock up the breachman, because last thing we need in particular is like, oh, do you know Wilford? And Home Dude is like, yeah, I've known him since I was 14. So it's like, we build a bridge again. It's like, all right, we're gonna have to keep you locked away because Audrey made a point to be like, there's some people on this train that are super loyal, and Ruth is like, oh, are you talking about me? If you're going to say it, just go ahead and say it. She's like, no, I'm talking about everyone that's ever worked for him. And it's like, and even Roach is like, all right, so who here has worked for him, was hired by Mr. Wilford? And it's Ruth, Roach, Ben, and Audrey, who were personally hired by him. So you're always going to have like a little bit of a special attachment to the man who kind of saved the world, kind of saved you all, you know. So that was kind of the point Audrey was making. But also, like, on the end of them, Ruth was the most, but like, obviously I'm sure that definitely plays in the conversation later on of why she's just like, Andre still doesn't trust me. Like, Melanie told me to trust him, but he doesn't trust me. So once again, that dynamic being the complicated situation that it is. But Josie telling, you know, the others from the Tell to support Andre in this, because Andre was reluctant to send her over there, because it's like, I'm sending you in enemy territory, but she's like, you want an eye on Wilford, like, and everything needs, I can be your eyes and ears over there. So plus me staying here, I'm not going to get better. So it's kind of a win-win situation. Plus you've already opened up your pipeline with whatever it is you got Pike doing, which he's talking to Terrence, and it's like, okay, you're getting a little bit of the supply, but it's like, oh, now the custodians aren't like the main supplier, the through line that it used to be. Like, on the main train, they'd be the ones, they're the movers and shakers, but not as much anymore. The tail is the new pipeline, and now it kind of takes a little bit away from the custodians, which I'm wondering what that means for Terrence, like what he's going to do in the long run for that, because the power, I mean, once again, he's a custodian because that's what he was before the train, and now he became a bit more of a, he was more of a power player. Now he's potentially going backpedaling to becoming a bit player in the grand scheme of things. You know, once you have that taste of power, you're not going to let it go. Which that reigns so damn true in the case of Wilford, because there's the whole conversation about Wilford's the one that constantly, he's kind of being a dick. He's not even hiding it, just out and around, like, oh, Melanie. He's like, I think she's going to be dead. Like, who wants to bet on it? It's like, this is supposed to be humanity's hope, and you're up here, like, chuckling and acting like it's so okay. Like, you know, even when it was time, like, all right, let's see whether or not Melanie's going to connect with the balloon, and he pops the balloon he has just to be a dick. And so it's like, and the moment Melanie, you know, it's the tense moment, like, is she going to connect? And he doesn't believe they will. There's even this nice moment of, like, Andre's holding Zara's hand and Zara's holding Ruth's, because, you know, Ruth and Andre were talking to Alex, and it's like, do you think that she's going to, you know, and she's like, Alex is like, if anyone's going to survive out there, it's going to be my mom. It's going to be Melanie. So, and even she had that conversation with LJ where it's like, yeah, I didn't think, Wilford's not going to really want to hear me, who never want to hear me say this, but she didn't expect to like feel as much as she does towards Melanie, that this was hurting as much as it was. Because she was hoping, like, when she met her mom again, it wouldn't mean anything. But now she's gotten to know her mom again, and like all that resentment is kind of fading away. It's still there, but it's fading away. And it's like her heart's kind of thawing when it comes to her mom, which obviously her dad's like, Wilford's not going to be too appreciative of that, Because there's even a whole conversation with LJ about like, okay, like, do you miss your parents? And she's like, well, to her, it's like, well, everyone was kind of frozen and lost. So my parents being dead, she's a little detached. So not the best barometer, but I think it's also like, it's like, oh, but Wilford raised you too, right? So obviously it makes sense, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, because she was like, yeah. Oh, yeah. She's like, I remember you. You were actually a dork. And then Alec was like, yeah, you were a bitch. She was like, yeah. But at the end of it, it's like, oh, let's not be friends. Let's be enemies. So I'm like, I guess, when they were younger, they had interactions and stuff like that. But I'm sure it just feels like that's probably LJ just trying to find her opening to be in Wilford's good graces. Because it's like I said, the way the episode said, but it makes it seem like she could be his potential eyes and ears of like, oh yeah, she knows what Pike is up to, him meeting with Terrence, and like, oh, like that weed pipeline and stuff. Like, obviously she shows up with weed later on, so maybe that's what that's just all about. But it's just like, she's definitely planning something and just don't know what, like how she's going to take advantage of the situation. But circling back to it, the moment like, I was bringing up earlier when Melanie was able to make contact, and it's like, okay, she's still alive, and because it's been like 3 days since they dropped her off, and so it's like, oh, she's still alive, she made contact. It's like, yeah, everyone's so excited. It's like, yeah, oh my god, everyone's so hopeful, it's amazing. And then you have Wilford being so, because he needs people broken and hopeless. Because if there's hope for reestablishing the world, he isn't as special anymore. Because he's the man that, the train tracks, the train, the bridge. It's like, oh my god, I'm so amazing. Even Andre leaning in, being like, oh, you're the one that connected these pieces of land that haven't been connected since the Ice Age. It's ha 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 ha. And it's like, oh yeah, like placating to him. And it's just like, oh, like, stroking his ego. Because he is the egotistical maniac that he is. That he, for him, it's like, I brought it up before, he enjoys being worshipped. He's like a god to people because he's like, I made the train. Even that line, I love when he was talking to, he's like, oh, Mr. Layton, look what you've done with yourself, going from stowaway to rebel leader to running my train. I forgot the exact wording, but Andre was basically like, well, let's be fair, it's not your train. Like that moment, it's like, because for him, he's still holding on to what he believes is his, and so if there's potential hope out there in the world, that's less he has leeway of controlling people, because he wants people hopeless and broken so that he can swoop in and be like, oh, I will be your savior yet again. But now Melanie and Andre are being seen as the saviors, and he doesn't like that. He's like, no one gets the spotlight but me, because this is pulling it more and more from his hands of him being able to grasp control of everything and everyone. So that's what it's about. You think you don't all be about like, oh, like, this is a good thing, you should be happy about that. But it's like, no, why would I be happy about my power slipping away? Because the more this becomes a thing, the more and more power he loses. He won't be the center of attention. He won't be worshipped the way he is. That, like I said, he's kind of like a child in that it's like, I want it to be about me. And once again, also, egotistical in that regard. So that's interesting, because it's just like, you hold this, and I think Alex is picking up on it too, looking at it like why is it, I mean, she's like, I get it, you want Snowpiercer and everything, that's what this is all about for you, but it's like, still, like, this is potentially the hope of humanity, like, and you're so gun-ho about my mom being dead, it's like, it leaves her with the complicated feelings, because it's like, yeah, I actually care about her, I don't want her to die, I want her to be okay, but hell, I can't say that in front of him, because that'll just piss him off. And as we've seen, his cruelty knows no bounds. He's, especially when there's a person, he's able to add in an extra layer of cruelty, and because even at the end, he's looking at Josie, and then like Josie kind of turns to look at the window, but he's gone. So it's like, she's, I figured as much, she's going to be a tool that either he's going to manipulate and get inside of her head to use against Andre, try to turn her against Andre, or at the very least, she is a piece that's falling into his territory. That it's like, hey, kind of do what I want you to, because hey, I'm taking care of Josie, so you're going to kind of owe me a favor. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Also, I can do all this good for her, but I can also do a lot of bad to her if you don't kind of do what I want. So it's, the problem with her being in enemy territory, even though it's got to be like a thing of like, hey, everything's under control, everything's working, everything's fine. Andre's got to put it at the front of like, we need the cooperation, but more so than anything, it's just like, because the whole point was to kind of make the people that are with him, to see like the good in Snowpiercer, so that they won't buy into the demonization that, Wilford tries to do about Snowpiercer, trying to demonize them. So regardless, the whole situation, all of it presents some very interesting elements, and I'm ultimately curious to see where all of this takes us going forward. I brought it up last episode, wondering whether or not they'd cut back and forth between what's going on with Melanie and this Snowpiercer. Like, it could be a thing of, like I said, they build it up like, oh, like we're doing everything on Snowpiercer, and then we cut back to an entire episode of that month period. Like, that could be the thing. It might not be. Next time we circle back to Melanie is when they're literally circling back to Melanie within a month's time. Maybe, maybe not. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle that, like whether we'll get to see like her side of things in that or not. Be cool if we could, but I'm curious whether or not they will. But obviously there's so much going on in Snowpiercer right now that it's like, that's enough to be like, all right, where's all this going to go in this, game of chess, So, especially with this new development with Audrey and stuff, old yet new development. So, we'll have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.